All right, 13.4, we're going to take a look at the costs and advantages of home ownership. And there are both. Please do not let anyone mislead you to think that it's all good or all bad, because there's always both. So we need a lot of vocabulary, and I don't want you to spend all the time writing it down. So if you didn't print things off, you're going to want to snap some pictures, because a lot of this is already typed in on my notes, and it's typed in on your notes as well if you want to print them off later. All right, so first, mortgage. A mortgage is a name for a loan on a house, okay? Home loan for a substantial amount over a lengthy time interval. It's also sometimes called a deed of trust or a security deed, okay? The down payment is just what we've called down payments before. It's the portion of the purchase price that you pay initially, whatever you pay up front. Term is the time until final payoff of the mortgage. And those are always given in years, okay, just like our time generally is. So you'll hear things called a 15-year term or a 20-year term or a 30-year term. Those are the three that are most common. The principal amount of the mortgage is the amount of the loan, which is found by taking the purchase price minus the down payment. That's the same way we've found the amounts of loans in the other contexts that we've done. Okay, none of that's any different. Here's where some different things come into play. A fixed rate mortgage is very much like the kind of loans that you get on other items, like the car, like the student loan, like the refrigerator or the dishwasher. It's a fixed rate. What it is that the interest rate on the loan will remain constant throughout the term. We'll talk about a different option for this in a little bit, but this is a fixed rate mortgage for the moment. And amortizing is the process by which the initial principal balance, together with the interest that we're going to be paying on the loan, is repaid to the lender through regular, constant, periodic, or typically monthly payments. Okay? So when you go to buy a home, and you get a loan, they will give you what's called an amortization schedule. And it's a big giant spreadsheet is what it is. And it will tell you month by month, and we're going to do a little bit of one in class today. It will tell you month by month what every payment is going to cost you, and it's a constant amount, it's the same thing. So it's $1,000 or $1,500 or whatever. And it will tell you how much of that is actually paying for the house, and how much of it is paying the lender for the luxury of borrowing their money. Okay? And then it'll tell you what the ending result is at the month, and then it comes back over to the beginning, and it starts over with that amount as being your new loan amount, and it does it again. And it does it for however long the month of the process that you have chosen, the term for your loan. All right, regular monthly payments is the payment required to repay a loan of P dollars, together with an interest at an annual rate R over a term T years. So this is a very funky looking formula because it's got fractions inside of fractions. But the quantities themselves should look a little bit like things we've seen before, right? You've got a 12 over 12 plus R. That kind of looks like our H over 100 plus H that we saw before. You've got an exponent that's 12 times T, right? 12 times T, what's that doing? Well, it's turning that yearly time into months. That's what you're really doing, is that exponent, there's a number of months, okay? Closing costs. Closing costs are imposed when the loan is finalized, i.e. at closing. So closing costs are negotiable. So you can usually say to the lender, to the buyer, the buyer can say to the seller that they want a certain amount of their closing costs covered. That's a negotiation feature that people will often use. But there's an amount that it costs you when you close on the house that doesn't actually pay for the house. You have to pay for the real estate agents possibly, right, if they're involved. You'll have to pay for the title, the actual document that says you own the house, just like a title on your car. There's a title fee, right? So there's different costs that are associated. You have to pay the title company who signs off on the title. Right? Everybody gets their cut, and so there's thousands of dollars that are incurred at closing that don't do anything towards paying for the house. Okay? So there's closing costs. So we're going to take a look at Ann and Andy. Ann and Andy decide that they're ready to buy a home. They find the perfect house, and they negotiate with their realtor for a purchase price of $120,000. It's definitely a starter home. right? $120,000. Very much starter home. My son and his wife right now are looking at homes. Starter homes are very expensive right now for many reasons, but they are. So $120,000. It doesn't really matter what any of these numbers are. We're just doing all the math for them behind the scenes anyway. They qualify with their credit union. A credit union is kind of like a bank, for a $100,000 fixed rate loan at 3.75% interest on a 20-year schedule. 3.75% would be ridiculously low right now. That would be fantastic. Rates are above 7% right now, just so you know. They're way higher than that. But the rate when we bought our house was close to this. It's actually a lower rate than that. So rates fluctuate a lot. That has to do with the federal government. Okay, so this rate is going to be a 3.75% interest rate. It says what is the down payment they must come up with for the home at closing. So there's not a formula that tells us this here. This is one of those, like, you need to look at it and figure out what it's asking you. How much did the house cost? And how much is their loan going to be? Do you see those numbers? How much do they have to make as a down payment with those constraints? $20,000, right? Does everybody see that? There's not a percentage formula on this one. They didn't tell them a certain percent. There's actually just a loan amount that's their cap, right? And this is the way it will work sometimes too. So they have a $120,000 cost, and they're going to be able to loan $100,000 of that. So they're going to have to pay $20,000 for their down payment. Okay, everybody good? Yes.
So if they had gotten approved for like $90,000, they didn't have $30,000. They only had like.
Yeah. So if they had gotten approved for $90,000 and they only had and they needed to come up with that other $30,000 and they didn't have it, then they probably have lost the house. They probably will not be able to get it.
Would they be able to like go take another loan out somewhere?
It depends. It depends on the lending institution. It depends on what the reason is for why. It might be that the house isn't worth that much, and they might go back to the seller and say, you wanted $120,000, but we're going to come back down and tell you that because our lender won't give us that, we can't give you that. Will you still take? And you give another offer. And so with housing the way that it is right now, it's inflated, as like everything else we talked about last time, right? There is some of that going on between appraisals not matching up with the value that lenders are willing to give towards the houses. So there's lots of different things that could happen. Yeah. Okay, regular monthly payment is what we're on. Okay, so our regular monthly payment, which I don't have written on this screen, and now you've flipped pages, so I don't think you guys have it written on your screen either, so, or in your paper either, so let me write it in. So the regular monthly payment is P times R over 12 divided by 1 minus 12 over 12 plus R, and it's raised to the 12t. Did I get it all in there right? I think so. Now, we have all of those values. Okay? So let's just go through them, top down, left, right. What's P? $100,000. P is the original amount of the loan, the principal. That's $100,000 that the bank is loan or credit union is loaning us. What is R? Okay, so it's the percentage rate, right? That turned into a decimal. So Aubrey, what did you say the rate was, or the number was?
0.0375.
Okay, so common mistake is to forget to move that decimal. Be careful. And you should know if you do it, because you'll get an answer that just doesn't quite make sense. It'll be either way, way, way too big or way, way, way too small when you don't move decimals, okay? The denominator is 12 on that. And then all of this is over 1 minus, I have 12 on top, and then I need to add the 12 and the 0.0375 for the bottom. So I'm just going to write that down as 12.0375. I have 12 here, and what's T? 20. It's the years of our loan. And just like when we were doing this in previous sections, I would encourage you to just multiply the 12 and the 20 and use that so that the calculator doesn't have an opportunity to not give you what you're expecting, okay? So what is 12 times 120? 240. So this part would be 240. Okay, everybody good? Now, again, If you're concerned with the parentheses or your calculator's given you some weird things in the past or something like that, feel free to just do the entire numerator and keep lots of decimals, and then do the entire denominator and keep lots of decimals and then divide them. That's totally acceptable. If you feel comfortable with doing it, all together, that's fine too. But we should be getting an answer that sort of makes sense in terms of a monthly payment on a $100,000 loan. And you may not know what that necessarily looks like, but it can't be a crazy big amount. Like, that just wouldn't make sense, right? So what do you get when you multiply these out? Multiply, divide, add, and subtract.
592.89.
That's what I got.
Okay, got 2, and I make 3. So that's right, it's $592. So this is the kind of statement that people are looking at when they say something like, it's cheaper to buy than to rent. Have you heard that phrase before? They're usually talking about the monthly payment. And we're going to come back to whether that statement's a true statement or not, but that's what they're referring to. In this particular kind of housing market, it's costing them about $600 to pay for their mortgage. But if they were renting, maybe it'd be costing them $1,000 to rent. And so when people are saying that, they're like, yeah, but it's cheaper to buy than to rent. They're talking about this number. Okay? All right. It's worth noting that a conservative does not mean liberal conservative here. Conservative, that this is actually talking about, is the word cautious. Okay? Cautious estimate for home ownership is to do a 15-year fixed rate mortgage with 20% down payment that will cost you no more than 25% of your monthly take-home pay. This is what would be considered a conservative estimate, right? Something that's going to keep you safe, not make you lose the house or go bankrupt. This actually comes from Dave Ramsey. Are you guys familiar at all? Some of you nods. We're a Dave Ramsey family. We don't owe anything except for the house, and we've only got 1.5 years left on it. And I'm telling you, I'm counting down the months. Not even joking. Very excited. My children have paid in cash for every single car that they've purchased. Of the 3 that have paid so far, 3 have bought 4 cars between them because one of them's upgraded in car. So if you're not familiar with who Dave Ramsey is, I would encourage you to go check him out. He's got a lot of really good financial wisdom. So we're going to take a look then at an amortization schedule based on Ann and Andy's purchase where they're paying this amount as a monthly payment, okay? So an amortization schedule looks like a spreadsheet. I mentioned that before. And if they are doing, what was the length of their loan? 20 years, right? It's 20 years. It will show this month by month for 20 years. We're not going to do it month by month for 20 years because that would be 240 lines long. You don't want to do that, right? That'd be crazy. But at closing for a house, they actually give you this thing. It's like the entire spreadsheet, and it's like 240 lines long. So we're going to do just 2 months worth, get a feel for what it's doing, and so forth. Now here's the interesting thing. The place where it says total payment, the total payment never changes. Every single month they're paying the same amount that they paid the month before, and we know that value. So even if you can't quite fill in all the details of this table, pay attention and recognize what you can fill in easily so that you can get the credit you can. Because as you know, my math lab parses out all the credit, right? Like it does partial credit on these things. So right now, I know for sure that the first 2 lines are going to say $592.89. Because I already found that. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, good deal. So we're going to look then at what happens to find our interest. So we're looking first at month 1. And at this point, everything else in the table will not match from month to month, okay? Everything will be different. It's just that first line that's going to be the same only. So we're going to look at month 1. Month 1, to find our interest, we know how to find interest. It's I equal PRT. That's how you find interest, right? But we need to take a look at what it is on this loan. So what is P for the loan? We did this. It's $100,000, right? It's the original amount of the loan. We did R. What's R? Yeah, 0.0375, the interest rate, right? Now, T time is a little bit different. This is the amount of time for 1 month, but it needs to be written in years. It's going to be point something, but it's easier to write it as a fraction. 1/12. Okay, so there's 1 month out of 12 months in a year, so this is 1/12. And I do realize that not all our months are perfectly symmetric. We still do, it's close enough, so we get close enough by doing 1/12. Okay, so it's going to be okay. All right, so grab your calculator. Let's figure out what the interest is on Ann and Andy's first month payment. What'd we get? 280 something. I'm sorry. No. That's the next thing I was looking at. I'm sorry. What was it? Yeah. There we go. 312.50. So $312 is just going flat out to the bank. That's the interest payment that goes in the next blank. $312.50. Okay, now think with me. If I make a payment of $592.89 and $312.50 is for interest, how can I figure out how much actually went to the principal of the loan? You just subtract. Okay, so the next one, the principal payment, Okay, let's move this again. The next piece, to find our principal payment, we take the $592.89 and we subtract off our $312.50. And what do we get? 280 point what? 39. Excellent. So up here in our table, this is now 280.39. Okay, so you paid almost $600. The bank, for the luxury of you borrowing the money, took 312 of it. I know I'm using round numbers now, but that's okay. And 280 of it actually went to the cost of your loan. So how can I figure out how much I still owe on the house?
Do you do 100,000 minus the principal?
Yes, you do. The house is but the loan was $100,000. I paid part of it to the bank. That's their service fee, right? And then part of it went to the cost of the house. That's the $280.39 that I just found. So if I take my $100,000 and I subtract the $280, that's how much my loan still has that I owe money on. So we end up with our new principal, which is $100,000 minus the $280.39. And what will that give us?
$99,719.61.
Okay, $99,719.60.
Wait, is it 61 or 60? Or does it matter?
Oh, I have 61 though. Sorry. So what will happen, kind of to answer the question you didn't quite ask, Savannah, is that you're going to have decimal errors in these, and my math lab will just count you wrong, and then I'll go back and I'll fix the silly stuff at the end where it's off by a decimal point too. So don't be freaking out about decimals, but I won't do it on your homework because you still have the opportunity to fix it yourself, but I'll fix it on quizzes and exams, okay? Okay, you ready for month 2? Okay, the process we do for month 2 is the same, but the new balance on the loan, the P value, is no longer 100,000. What's my P value now? Yeah, it's the 99,719.61. So I'm going to shrink this for month 1 so we have more space. And we'll write in month 2. Okay, so for month 2, we're going to do the same thing. Our interest is the new principal, though. That's the $99,719.61. But the interest rate and the time are the same, right? Because it's a fixed rate mortgage. So I have 0.0375 for my interest rate and 1/12 for my time. Okay, so think with me. If the principal is smaller, which it is, right? What should this interest rate be compared to the $312.50? Same, bigger, or smaller? Should be slightly smaller, right? Should be slightly smaller number because I'm multiplying by 99,720-ish instead of by 100,000. So what do you get for the interest for the second month? Yeah, it's barely smaller, right? 311.62. So up here, 311.62. Okay, good deal. How can I figure out again how much of my money went toward the principal? You subtract. So my principal payment is going to be my amount of my regular payment. So it's still the $592.89, but now I'm taking off the new interest number that I just got, $311.62. And what should happen is I should get a number slightly more than I got last time. Why? Because the interest rate is slightly less. And I'm subtracting that amount, right? So this number should be slightly higher than the 280.39. What is this one? Okay, did I write that down what you said, Mackenzie? Good deal. 281.27. So this is 281.27. Okay, when you do one more thing, that's the new principal. How do I find my new principal? All right, so we take our previous principal, whatever it was, that's the $99,719.61, and we subtract off the new payment that we just made, the previous line, $281.27. And again, it should be slightly less than the $99,700 that we had, right? It should go down. What does that give you? $99,438.34. $99,438.34. Okay, so somewhere along the way, probably somebody has told you, or you maybe you haven't heard, that there's sort of a general, like, you should be planning to stay in a house for a certain length of time before you buy it. Otherwise, it might turn into a bad investment. Have you heard that before? Like, if you're just going to be here for a year, that's just a waste. That you've taken on a lot of risk. And here's why. The amount that you're paying every month toward the cost of that house, right, is not changing how much you still owe on the house very much, right? It's only going down about $300, give or take, right? It's not going down very much every month. So at the end of a year, you're not going to be very much less than what it was at the beginning of the year. And if you need to then go and sell it, by the time you have to pay the closing costs and all the other things, you're going to lose money. The risk part is even more substantial than that. What if the housing market drops during the time that you do that? So I will tell you that happened to my husband and I. We lived in Ohio for 3 years and the housing market dropped. We bought a house at $160,000, and when we sold it 3 years later, we could only sell it for $135,000. And we lost a lot of money. And that didn't even count all the money that we paid into the bank to make it happen to begin with. So that's what people are talking about, is that you're taking on a big risk. Not the little risk here, which you're taking on too. You're taking the little risk that you might just not recoup the closing costs, but you're taking on the big risk of what happens if the housing market decreases, which it can and has. It's not an uncommon, like, never going to happen again kind of thing. If it'll happen again, I think we're in that right now. I think it's going to happen. There's no way my house is worth as much as they say it's worth. Yeah.
So, let's say you move.
Yeah.
You haven't paid off your loan yet.
Yes.
You still continue to pay the loan for the house.
So when you move, what happens is probably and hopefully you sell the house. And so the seller pays you the money, you pay off the loan. Hopefully you keep a profit from it. That would be ideal. If you don't have a profit of it, like we did, then you just have to pay it out of pocket to make up the difference. Yeah, and it can be a very detrimental thing. Okay? But not only that, but it doesn't just cost for that kind of things for home ownership. There's other costs in home ownership that you might not be aware of. One of them is property taxes. Property taxes are collected by a county or other local government, and they can cost up to several $1,000s annually. Both property taxes and mortgage rate are tax deductible. Okay, so you probably have heard somebody say something like that. You get a break on your taxes kind of thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. But these are tax deductible. Okay, so property taxes can vary substantially from place to place. Okay, so like our property taxes, let me see if I can remember how it went. Our property taxes in Ohio, when we lived there, were substantially higher per cost of the house than they are in Oklahoma. And from city to city they are too, and they can change. So when a school passes a bond issue and things like that, that can affect your property taxes. Okay, so our property taxes where we live had a school pass something, and they went up $1,000 from one year to the next. They went down the next year after that, but for 1 year we had a $1,000 bill that we did not have the year before. And our property taxes are around $3,500. That's not nothing. $3,500 is a lot of money. Okay. Second thing, homeowners insurance. Homeowners insurance covers losses due to fire, storm damage, and other casualties. They cover losses for somebody getting hurt on your property. So you'll see your homeowners insurance sometimes be increased in places where you have storms like us, right? You'll see them have different restrictions on them for things like wind or hail, if you're in places that are like that. Our property insurance in Ohio was dirt cheap. Apparently just nothing ever happens there. I don't know. I mean, like it was just a fraction of what it is here. It was crazy cheap for property insurance up there, our homeowners insurance. But our homeowners insurance here, again, is around $3,500 a year. That's not nothing. It's a lot of money. But it covers things too, like if somebody got hurt on your property, right? If you have a swimming pool, if you have a trampoline, those things make your cost of your homeowner's insurance go up because you have a bigger liability. If you have certain kinds of dogs, warning, don't just get any dog. They will ask you, do you have this kind of dog? And you're under penalty of, perjury and things like that. That's probably not the right word. I don't know. But whatever. Like if you lie to them and then your dog bites somebody and somebody sues you, insurance is not going to pay for it. You're going to be responsible because you lied to the insurance company. Like there are ramifications. And the last one is maintenance. Maintenance is the funny one that catches people and they're like, oh, you mean like the landlord's not going to come and fix that? No, because there's no landlord. It's you. Last year, I've got all sorts of fun stories to tell you. Last year, we had 2 AC units go out at our house. We have an upstairs and we have a downstairs, and both of them went out the same summer. $8,000 to fix our ACs. $8,000. We had other things happen the same too. My husband had surgery, and something happened to one of the cars. I don't even remember what, if it was, I don't know, we had a car issue. I mean, like, it was like massive amounts of cost all at the same time. It was crazy. Like, but if you were renting, you're not out the $8,000 to fix the AC. The landlord is, right? So these are things that people don't always take into consideration when they say that the cost of home ownership is cheaper than the cost of renting. It might be, and it might work out to your advantage, and I hope that it does. That's great, but it also might not. You can get caught in lots of ways. So we're going to take a look at, not the maintenance example, but the monthly payment example if you actually have taxes and insurance. So Ann and Andy have their regular monthly payment, which we already found it was the $592 number, right? And then they also have an annual tax, and their situation is $932, and their annual interest is $660. Okay, so they're in a place where the annual insurance, is not very expensive. That's probably not going to happen in your Oklahoma places, even on a $100,000 house right now. So we're going to figure out what our monthly amount is for each of these things. So our monthly taxes and our monthly insurance. So how can I figure out how much these things are costing me monthly? Yeah, I divide it by 12. If the taxes in a year cost me $932, then they would cost me divided by 12 monthly. So how much is that monthly for my taxes?
77.66.
Yeah, and we'll round to 6.7. So $77.67. Our insurance is $660 for our 12 months. So how much is our monthly insurance cost? $55. Perfect. So what would we actually find to be our total monthly payments? What would I have to do? Okay, I have to add the tax, $77.67, and the insurance, and what else? Yeah, the house payment itself, which was $592.89. So my monthly cost is not really $600. It's more than that, right? Just the regular run-of-the-mill things that I'm required by law to do. And so, and you are required to pay your taxes, and you are required to have insurance. Like it's not nobody's going to lend you the money if you don't have insurance on the property. They're not going to. So what is your total amount that you would be paying every month as the homeowners, as Ann and Andy? $725.56. Now, is that still cheaper than the $1,000 rent that they maybe has an option? Sure it is. But that $1,000, that amount that they're saving, that $275 that they're saving by doing that, they better be putting some of it away for an emergency, because the emergency is going to happen. You just don't know when, right? There's going to be something that's going to break, and they're going to have to fix it. Yep. All right, so one of the things that I had mentioned is about tax deductible. So some financial advisors will actually tell you that you should not pay off your home early because you lose a tax write-off. Have you heard that phrase before? Even if you don't know what it means, have you heard somebody say something like that? So in other words, what they're saying is you'll have to pay more money in taxes because what you would have paid in interest can't be subtracted off of what you owe in your taxes. And it's a true statement. So we're going to consider if this statement as a whole, that is it a good or bad idea, is a correct statement with their situation. So Ann and Andy's loan is $100,000, 3.75% interest. A says, how much money would Ann and Andy pay in interest the first year? So we're doing sort of an approximation. If we really wanted to find it, we'd have to do the amortization schedule for 12 months, and we'd have to add up the 12 interests. You guys with me on that? So we're going to do it as a yearly amount, and it's going to be not exactly perfect, but it's going to be close, because I want to show you how this works. So what they would do is they would take, this is right, that I equal PRT bit, right? The principal is $100,000. The interest rate is 0.30375, and we're looking at 1 year worth. So if you multiply these out, this will give you approximately how much they would pay in interest for the first year in their home. Not perfect, but approximate. What do you get? It should be $3,750. You might have a decimal off on what you put in there. Yeah. Okay, $3,750. Okay, so it's a $100,000 note. They're paying $3,750 in the interest to the bank. So the bank is making that amount of money. Everybody good? Okay. So if you take a look over here then, and Ann and Andy, we've got to put them in a tax bracket in order to make sense of this. So we're putting them in a 25% tax bracket. That's rather arbitrary, but I want to show you, it doesn't matter what the 25%. I could put it in a 10% tax bracket and the principal will still hold. It's just an arbitrary amount to show you how it works, okay? So if we were looking at this, the way that this actually works on your taxes when you go to the accountant, okay, is that she says something like, or he says something like, how much did you pay in interest on your home? And you say $3,750. Notice your property taxes as well, which we did from them before, is also tax deductible, but that's still going to happen whether you own the house outright and have paid the bank off or not, right? Like when I'm done paying off my house, I still have to pay taxes on it. Y'all know that, right? Like that doesn't go away just because I paid off the house. I still have to pay that. So we're just looking at the part that's eventually going away. Eventually the interest part goes away. Okay, so if they're in a 25% tax bracket, what this means is that they pay 25% of their income in taxes, okay? So if they make $100,000 in a year, they're gonna pay $25,000 to the government, and they're gonna keep $75,000. That's what that means. So everybody got a good idea of that now? Okay, if you didn't before, now you do, okay? So they're going to take this $3,750 that they paid to the bank, right? And 25% of it, because that's their tax bracket, is how much that they're going to save on their taxes. Okay? So what do they get when they do this? How much are they saving on their taxes by owning that home? $937.50. That's how much they save on their taxes. Now, obviously, if they have to have the loan, they aren't ready to pay it off, they should definitely save the money on the taxes, right? Like, no question, save the money on the taxes, absolutely. That's not the question, though. The question is, if they were in a position to pay it off, should they? right? A rich relative that they weren't real close to, so they weren't super sad about, passed away, left them a whole load of money. And you're like, dude, I got a whole bunch of money. Should I pay off the house or should I not? That's where we are. Are you with me? Okay, that's the question we're asked. Okay, so what we're actually saying here, if we're the financial advisor, is that to avoid paying the credit union $3,750, right? We're going to avoid paying the government. I said that wrong. We're going to pay the credit union $3,750 in order to not pay the federal government $937.50. I'm going to say that again. We are choosing, if we choose to keep the loan in this situation, we are choosing to pay the credit union $3,750 in order to save $937.50 on our taxes. Is that a good deal? No, that's a terrible deal, right? We're paying way more to the credit union than we're saving on our taxes if we have the ability to pay it off. That's not a good idea. What's more, so the answer is no. This is no. The answer is no. What's more is that there's other ways you can save on your taxes at the same rate. Did you know that all of your charitable giving counts in that way too? Money to your church, money to 501c3, those are charitable organizations that are accredited with the government, right? So all of those things, Salvation Army, for example, Compassion International, probably some of the different organizations that are filtered through your church that you do for compassionate giving, things like that are as well. So no, this is a terrible idea. If you want to send somebody $3,750 so that you can save $937.50, give it to your church, right? That'd be a much better use of your money than giving it to the bank. All right, a few more things. This is just me running through descriptions because I think you should be aware, at least to say, I've heard of that before. Escrow. Escrow is a reserve account maintained by the mortgage lender. Taxes and insurance are collected up front from the borrower and paid by the lender to respective agencies. So typically speaking, when you buy a house, they will force you to create an account with them, and you pay the monthly payment, that $725 every month, and at the end of the year, or whenever it's due, they pay the taxes and they pay the insurance. You don't actually pay it directly. They do that because they make sure that you pay the property taxes and that you have insurance if some calamity happened on your property, because they actually are the ones who are out the money as well, because they're the lender, right? So that's called an escrow. An ARM, an adjustable rate mortgage. These do not have fixed interest rates over time. They generally start really low, or at least lower than other fixed rates, but they raise periodically. These are very dangerous because you don't have control over knowing that every single month your payment's going to be $592.89. You know, for 3 years it might be, and then all of a sudden it jumps up to $1,592.89. Maybe not that high, but you get the idea, right? You don't have control over that because the interest rate can change. And there's different things that govern ARMs. The adjustment period, it's the time between rate adjustments, typically 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. The index, the standard fluctuating average that is the basis for the new adjusted rate. Margin is the additional amount added to the index by the lender, typically a few percentage points. Discount, the amount by which the initial rate may be less than the sum of the index and the margin. They often have an interest rate cap, which limits how much the rate can increase. So maybe it doesn't double, right? You know, like it starts out at 4%, but it can only go up certain amounts in those time frames. It's got a limit, it's a cap. Periodic rate is the cap per adjustment period. So there's one that would say like it can only go up total 5% over the entire course of the loan, but it can only go up, you know, like 1% at a time kind of thing. The overall cap is the limit on the rate as it increases over time, typically about 5%. That's what I was referring to. And then the payment cap is the limit on how much the payment can go up in each time. Negative amortization is actually an increasing loan principle, where you pay the money and the amount you owe goes up. That can happen. That's really scary, right? You paid the money and you owe more next month than you did this month. Convertible features is the contractual ability to convert a fixed rate mortgage, usually at certain designated points in time, So your adjustable rate mortgage might say that you can change it to a fixed rate mortgage after you've had it for 3 years. Or maybe it says that you can do that every 3 years. You have the opportunity to revisit. Do I want to change this to a fixed rate mortgage? So if the interest rates come down, right, that might be beneficial to you. If the interest rates go up, it might not be beneficial to you, but you have that option. And then there's prepayment penalty, which we've talked about as well. This sometimes happens when the lender actually charges you extra if you pay something off early. That's nice, right? Charge you extra money. So there's not unearned interest like we were doing in 13.3. There's actually an extra penalty if you pay it off early. Why in the world would somebody penalize you for paying something off early? Think about that. They lose money. They're losing the interest money that they would have gotten for the next 10 years or whatever from you. That's why that can exist. That's it.